Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast sponsored by Big O Tires. I'm your host, Blair Kerkhoff, and it's Tuesday, September 24th. A Royals era ends this week with the announcement that manager Ned Yost is stepping down. Yost took over in 2010, and although this season will mark the second straight in which the Royals lose at least 100 games, he oversaw some of the best times in franchise history, with the World Series appearance in 2014 and the franchise's second World Championship in 2015. Star columnist Sam Mellinger covered every year of the Yost era and shares his thoughts on what made Yost a success, why the decision happened now, and who might become the successor. Later, Chiefs reporter Sam McDowell helps me welcome the newest member of the Star's sports staff and primary Chiefs reporter, Herbie Teope. Or maybe we should say we welcome back Herbie, who spent the last 4 seasons covering the Saints for the Times-Picayune and the New Orleans Advocate, plus the NFL Network. But before then, he covered the Chiefs for Chiefs Digest and the cable outlet known today as Spectrum Sports. We are thrilled to have Herbie back in the fold. Star columnist Sam Mellinger is here a couple hours after the announcement that Royals manager Ned Yost would step down after this season. Retire, I guess, is the word. He certainly won't be with the Royals after this year. 5 games left in the Royals season. It's 5 or 6, whatever it is. This is the last week of Ned Yost as the Royals manager. Sam, were you surprised by the news?
No, but I should also say here that I thought he'd retire last year. So I'm surprised I'm right. I guess maybe that's the part. But it's time. He had a really good run here. The one of 2 managers to win a World Series, and the other one has his number retired. Nobody ever took the team to back-to-back World Series. I mean, he was part of some of the best moments that the Royals have ever had. But he's also 65. And, I think that there's a feeling from both sides that the Royals and Ned can be better off if they kind of move in a different direction. It was great while it lasted. Most managers don't get 10 years with one team. But I think this makes sense for both sides. He's
going to leave as the winningest manager in Royals history, not by winning percentage because he'll finish under 500, but in terms of number of victories, he will have not lapped the field, but he's put some distance between him and second place. And you're right, when managers don't last as long as Ned Yost, especially in markets the size of Kansas City.
Yeah, and there were times where it didn't seem like he would last this long. Correct. You know what I mean? July of 2014 sticks out when that was 2 years after the our time disaster. And, they were below 500 after the All-Star break. And, there was a time, and not just Ned, but the general manager too, Dayton Moore. There was a time where, there's owners in baseball that would have fired those guys at that time. I'll never stop wondering what would have happened with Ned if the wild card game didn't turn. Yep. The 6th inning there where Donald Ventura came in with the lead. 2 days came in for James Shields 2 days after throwing 72 pitches in the season finale. Had never been in a relief appearance like that, and just blew up. Gave up a 3-run homer to Brandon Moss, then a single through a wild pitch. And, by the time Ned got him, Pedro Martinez was ripping him on Twitter and Ned was getting booed, as he walked off the field. And I was going back through today and I read Andy McCullough's incredible story on that wild card game that ran, a year later. I still think that's one of the best things we've had in the paper since I've been here. But anyway, he had talked to some fans and other people that just, felt as he was walking off the field, oh man, I feel bad for him. That's it for him. He's done. He's going to be fired. And, they bailed him out. The team came back, and now we don't remember that game for Yordan Ventura's, relief appearance. Remember for Salvador Perez somehow pulling a slider 5 feet off the plate down the third baseline and winning the game. That's kind of Ned, wasn't always like pretty or how you drew it up, but shoot, man, like in the end, it's the result you wanted.
I think you just started covering baseball when the Royals hired Ned. It was right around the same time, I believe. What were your earliest impressions of him? Was he the guy that you believe could right the ship and get things going, in a positive direction? The Royals had shown really no signs of life up until 2010. But what were your earliest impressions?
Yeah, well, I had to put in a year of time on Buddy Bell, and then and then get through Trey Hillman before being gifted with Ned.
I apologize for the mistiming there.
It's easy to forget. But the first impressions of Ned, I think, were pretty positive. I thought when they hired him, this has been out there before. I think we wrote it at the time that, the Royals, when they hired Trey Hillman, they really wanted Joe Girardi. And I don't know how that was going to go, but once the Yankees job came open, then, the Royals were out of the running. And then they hired Trey Hillman, who had also been, in on the Yankees. But then with Ned, when I got talking with him and, sort of hear his story a little bit, he seemed like, in a lot of ways, the kind of guy that Dayton would have wanted to hire in the first place. And, kind of take Girardi out of it. But he just like fit that profile. And I guess what I mean by that is, old school baseball guy, believes in the power of, cohesion, believes in belief, if I can say that, believes in the importance of confidence, more old school than analytics, and believes and has experience in 2 rebuilds. We talk about Milwaukee, and he was the manager there until he got dumped with, I think, 12 games left in a pennant race. But he was also there, as different roles as a third base coach, I think, bench coach, bullpen coach in Atlanta. And I think Dayton really liked that profile. So it made sense from there. And then, as a guy, I really like Ned. I think he's funny. He is quick. I like talking with him. He's got a million stories, and not all of them are about baseball. He's got stories about driving Andre the Giant like 3 hours from the airport to some, WWF at that point, wrestling match. He's got, Dale Earnhardt stories and Jeff Foxworthy stories and stories of deer hunting. He's a really interesting guy. Just, personality wise, I'll miss talking with him.
For sure. He left, or he was elevated to the Brewers job, or got the Brewers job when their organization was, stockpiling young talent, and he was the guy that was going to bring along this young talent, and he didn't get to see it through to its fruition. That was not the case in Kansas City. The Royals started to have, they had a lot of high draft picks, and he got to manage these guys and build that clubhouse. Guys like, Hosmer and Moustakas, and then the young Lorenzo Cain and Escobar coming over in the trade. He inherited, Alex Gordon and Billy Butler and a couple others. But for the most part, he was the manager that molded a young team into a championship level team. And I think I actually think it would have happened for him in Milwaukee if they had a little more patience with him there. But he did get to finish the job in Kansas City. And will that be something to remember him by?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think about that. I thought about it at the time, when that 2012 season was supposed to be, sort of the coming out.
Our time.
And and that was just a disaster. The our time season, and this is something that I'll never forget for whatever reason, but the Royals were booed 16 minutes into their home opener that year. And didn't win a home game until May. And when that happens, and then again, when you're under 500, after the All-Star break in 2014, which by then was, the 4th full season and really 5th season that Ned had been there. If you've got that in your history, what happened in Milwaukee, I just wonder if you start seeing ghosts a little bit. And, he got grumpy and, short. And, I think that there was probably some worry, not just from him, but, from the front office about, gosh, like, at that time Dayton had been there since June of 2006. So that's 8 years. And, I remember looking it up at the time, like how many, general managers get, 8 seasons with no postseasons.
Correct.
And I can't remember if there was anybody on that list, but if so, it was a very short list. And, those were trying times. And, in some ways, the ultimate test for what the Royals had said they believed in. You know what I mean? Like they believe in their own guys. They believe in, homegrown. And they believe in a clubhouse, a locker room. And, it's hindsight now, but that's what got them through. They had that ridiculous run in August. And that was also the year that didn't Eric Hosmer break his hand like 2 hours after the trade deadline?
Right. Missed time.
Yeah, missed about 4 weeks, if I remember right. And, then Billy Butler's playing first base. And this is a team that, that prides itself on defense. You're like, oh, that is a problem going from, Hosmer to Billy Butler. But, dang it, if Butler didn't show up pretty well. If I remember right, they played Oakland, really, maybe the first series after Hosmer's broken hand. And Billy made a couple good plays and, hit the crap out of the ball. And the Royals actually went on a big run. And, it was just, that was the beginning of what really proved to be 2 straight years of the Royals having their absolute best moments with their backs flat against the wall.
Right.
And that wild card game will always be, the clearest example of that. But there's a million others. There's, game 4 against Houston. And, there's game 6 against Toronto. And, there's Eric Hosmer's, dash home in Queens. I mean, there's a million of those examples. And look, I think that the importance of a manager in modern big league baseball is usually but overstated. I really do believe that they don't, the decisions are out of their hands now that managers used to make. But I do believe that a manager has an impact on that clubhouse, and it has an impact on, guys being focused and, guys believing in the right things and the important things. And, the old cliche about like rowing in the same direction. And, for anybody who is old enough to remember the Royals before 2010, that was a franchise almost defined by dysfunction and defined by a clubhouse splintering where, there's some old veterans that just want to, present themselves for the next contract, or some young players that, don't care about the team and just want to, pad their own stats. Like that stuff happened every year all over the clubhouse. And it really stopped with Ned. And, I firmly believe that the players should always get, the credit and the blame. They're the ones that make this whole thing go. But Ned was absolutely a critical, important part of that as well.
I think that's an excellent point. I don't think in the decade that he was the manager here that the media or the public, if there was any discontentment in the clubhouse, we never heard about it. Never knew it. Never heard about it. And I believe it rarely existed. Just in. I'm not saying everything was peace and harmony the entire time, but you're right. I do remember those pre-Ned teams, and and it was they were rudderless ships for the most part, and it was never that way with Ned.
Yeah, and one more, I think an important part of that too is Ned, and he is stubborn. I'm not saying he's not stubborn, but there's a perception of him that he is ceaselessly stubborn. That he is like that is just his way or nothing. But Ned made a couple really important and significant changes. One of them, maybe the one that's been talked about the most is, he kind of gave up a lot of control, or at least, accepted a change in strategy when, in 2014, remember that was, the sixth inning is Aaron Crow's. That's why he pitches the sixth inning.
Yep.
And then gave up the home run to that little second baseman that actually, like, the Royals signed in spring training. I can see his face, Daniel Nava.
In Boston, Nava now, at Fenway.
Yeah. Daniel Nava now playing for the T-Bones, I believe, at least this past season, hit a grand slam off Aaron Crow. And it was just a terrible decision. I remember watching that game online from the press box in Denver. The Chiefs were playing the Broncos, and it was just, oh man, like that. That was another one of those, like, oh my gosh, like if this is the beginning of the end, this might be it for Ned. But after that, Dave Island came to him and said, like, look, like let's rearrange the way that we do this and shift around the sixth inning. It doesn't have to be Aaron Crows. And, a stubborn man says, no, get out of here, and also let's go back to Milwaukee. And I just think that it would be easy for you to think like to not trust anybody and to think that, you absolutely have to prove your own worth because, of how it ended in Milwaukee. And I'm going to prove that I'm the smart guy and I can do this. And Ned accepted the help and the Royals were better for it. The other way, and I think this is important in that locker room clubhouse cohesion piece of it. Ned is an old school guy, absolutely old school. And he was raised where, you don't blast music in the clubhouse and you don't celebrate every big play or every routine win or all these things. And he shifted 100% on that. The Royals were the celebratingest team in Major League Baseball from 2013 to whenever it stopped happening in 2016. And, and I think in some ways that had to Ned just had to let that go, because that is not how he was raised. That is not like what he believed in when he came to the Royals. But I think he saw, I wrote this in a column that should be up pretty soon. But like Ned's decision chart is very simple. It was basically, will this give my players more confidence? If yes, do it. If no, try again. And it was, well, they want to play music. It makes them feel better. Let's let them play music. They want to have a million hand signals every time they get a single to right field. Like, let them do their hand signals. And, that, again, the players deserve the credit. But, Ned was really, really, really successful in fostering all of that personality that the Royals showed. And I think that Kansas City really fell in love with.
Hey, do you think the ownership change had anything to do with this decision? I know you said that you thought it would have happened a year ago, and Ned was on a one-year deal this year.
Yeah.
What about the prospective ownership change from David Glass to John Sherman?
Yeah, it might. Yeah, it might. I mean, it's funny about he's been on a one-year contract forever. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, again, Andy. But after 2014 and they go to the World Series and they're playing again the next year, they're basically wire to wire as the first place team. And I think Andy wrote one time that he called Ned a lame duck manager because he was on a one-year contract at that point. Ned didn't like that. That was great. I think the ownership change didn't help. I think that Ned has a lot of respect and obviously a pretty deep history with David Glass. But, and look, it doesn't matter because I was wrong the year before, but I kind of think he was going to be done now anyway. He's 65 and I know he's making more money he's ever made in his life, but he's got a good life waiting for him in Georgia, and he's got his wife of 40 some years and he's got this dream house that they built together. And I really think that he's ready to do that stuff. He told me last year, this is part of why I thought he was done last year. He talked last year about when he was going through the decision about, his wife, her parents worked their whole lives. And I forgot what they did for a living, but, hard work, lots of hours, and then retired. And short after retirement, they had this, retirement life plan of all these things they wanted to do. And one of them was diagnosed with cancer and that was the end. And, and he brought that up without me. I didn't know that. He brought that up as just a sort of, I don't want that to be us, or more specifically, his wife doesn't want that to be us. She wants to be able to enjoy these years. And I think that's, that more than anything is why this is happening. But, I think that the ownership may have just been an unnecessary one more straw, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So is Mike Matheny the guy?
That's who I'd bet on,
Yeah.
It seems that's the pattern, right? The Trey Hillman, or I'm sorry, the Ned Yost.
That's how Ned got it, right? He was
Ned Yost model.
hired for a front office job that didn't exist before he got there.
Yeah.
Special assistant sort of thing.
I do think that that there's a lot that the front office likes about Mike Matheny. Generally he fits the profile. I think they want somebody with previous experience, and whether that's a direct tie to, the chance they took on Trey Hillman that didn't work out or not. But, Ned had previous experience and that worked out a heck of a lot better. I need to do a little bit more homework on why. I know that the fan opinion of Mike Matheny is very negative. Very, very negative. And I think that the opinion of him generally in St. Louis is also very, very negative. But I need to ask some more questions and, just talk to a few more people about exactly why. I'm a big believer in second chances generally. I think that smart people who, care about their work can learn from mistakes and get a lot better. But I want to know more about why. I mean, it seems like a consensus, don't you think?
Yeah, it has been, which is interesting for a guy that 6.5 seasons with the Cardinals, 56% winning percentage, won 100 in 2015, got the Cardinals to the World Series the year before the Royals made their 2-year run in 2013. Right. So he won. He won baseball games, which I thought was the objective here. So, but you're right. I've heard the same. I've heard a lot of the same things, and I know there were some reports almost immediately after the Royals announced Yost's retirement that Matheny was the guy, and I think other people closer to the situation, media in Kansas City. This was coming from national types, but media in Kansas City, upon a little more reporting, determined that is not the case. There has been, as of Monday afternoon, nothing, no type of announcement about a successor for Ned.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, and I think Dale Swaim and I really like Pedro Grifol.
I do too. My gosh, I think I think he's, to me, he's the Dave Tobe of the of the Royal staff, a guy that really deserves to be a manager somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a very diverse skill set. I mean, he can get micro and talk about like hitting technique and approach and all that stuff. And I think he's also a good, sort of, for lack of a better term, like swag coach of, just pumping guys up. He's bilingual. He's got a history in scouting. I mean, I just think that Pedro has a future doing whatever he wants. And if he wants to be the manager, I think he'd be great. But Matheny just, I don't know, it really does fit the profile. And I don't think a decision has been made on that. I don't think a decision can be made on that, in part because what we were just talking about with the change in ownership. I'm sure that, sort of technically or whatever, Dayton can make that higher, but I don't know. If you've got a new owner who's going to take over in 2 months, don't you want him at the table?
At the head of the table, to be honest with you.
So, I don't think that decision, can be made quite yet.
Right. Okay. Well, when it is, we'll talk about it because that's what we
sure
do.
Will.
That's what we do on SportsBeat KC. Sam, thanks a lot.
Yeah, man. Okay.
Save big on the biggest brand tires. Where else? Your participating Big O tires. Now through September 22nd, get up to $70 off select sets of Michelin and BF Goodrich brand tires. Plus, get up to an additional $120 in mail-in rebates on qualifying purchases using your Big O Tires credit card. Only at Big O Tires, the team you trust. Not valid with other offers. Disposal fees extra. Up to 10% shop fee based on non-discounted retail price. Not to exceed $35 where permitted. For the store nearest you, go to BigOTires.com.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Sam McDowell is here. I'm here, Blair Kerkhoff. And look who else is here.
Look who's here.
How about that? Herbie Teope is here and got into town on Sunday.
Yes, it is.
Drove in just for the podcast.
Exactly. I drove 16 hours from New Orleans just to sit in this podcast.
And then back. You'll be going back after this.
No, I'm not going back.
We were so honored that you did that, Herbie. I'm telling you. No, it is great to see you again. You're here to cover the Chiefs for the Kansas City Star as the lead beat writer.
That's what they tell me.
Yep. And you've been on the clock now for a day and a half or so. You weren't at the game Sunday because you were still in transit.
That's right. I was driving through the rain that left Arrowhead and made its way to St. Louis. I was driving through that, but I did wave to y'all. As I passed Arrowhead, I knew y'all were still there. I waved.
Did you at least have it on the radio? Were you listening?
I did have the radio on. Yes, I did.
Listen to Mitch and,
yes,
the guys? Okay.
It is so... I'm going to tell you, after being away for a while, as soon as I heard, touchdown, Kansas City, I was like, wow, I'm back. I am back.
And you are back because, and I noticed today when you came to the media room, you went right back to your old seat in there. Herbie, you are no stranger to this area and to this team. Just give us the resume. Give us a little background. Where were you? Let's go. I'll tell you what. Let's go to the immediate past. I think we've established you came from New Orleans. What were you doing in New Orleans?
I was covering the Saints for the Times-Picayune from 2016, 2017, and then the NFL Network / NFL.com hired me in 2018. And then I returned to the Saints beat for the second go-round with the Times-Picayune just recently. And then the opportunity to come back here was too strong. It was absolutely too strong. As you mentioned there, sticking with the media, I started out in the Kansas City media scene with Time Warner Cable, Metro Sports, and then that eventually became, Sports Channel, and then I don't know what the name is now.
It was Charter for a while. It was Spectrum.
5 different names, yeah.
Bright House. It's been everything.
And I actually used to do some online work for the Kansas City Star's website. Look at that. What is it? Recording?
Getting some instruction from our producer Kathy,
who has no faith in us. We should probably tell our listeners that the question we were just asked was, "Did you hit record?"
And I will tell you that he got 2 thumbs up here to the window behind me here.
The time's ticking, so I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah, but covering the Chiefs though for Associated Press, Topeka Capital Journal, Pro Football Weekly. So I've been around the team a lot, and I found it unique when Coach Reed says it's good to have Herbie back too. I was like, see, he remembers me. The North remembers.
He does joke around. That proves he does joke around.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Did you get a farewell from Sean Payton?
I did. Sean actually sent me a text and said, "Good luck."
Nice.
Yeah, and Saints general manager Mickey Loomis last week, because I was in Los Angeles for the Saints Rams game. He was up in the press box, pulled me aside, and said, "We heard you're going home. Good luck. Thanks for your coverage." So yeah, that was nice of them.
Very nice. Now, as I recall, you're a big Kansas Jayhawk guy.
Oh, goodness. Here we go. Here we go. That's a big negative, Ghost Rider. Big negative. I'm a Kansas State grad, proud, purple pride, everything.
E-Maw, baby.
E-Maw, baby.
Yeah. So when did you go to K-State?
Well, the joke there was I was on the 9-year plan. Because, you see, now you're getting into my first career. I was in the Army, and towards the end of my career, decided to change degrees from Justice Administration from Hawaii Pacific University, and went to the J School out there at Manhattan. And so I was there. I started out in 2004, and I didn't officially graduate until like 2012, 2013. Yeah, it was the job, I was like back and forth.
A little bit of a late start to the college, to the campus life for you. Why is that?
The career, man. The Army. Yeah, the Army. The Army did it.
Yeah. 20-year vet.
Yep, 20 years. 20 years. Wow. Hard to believe.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. You were your first Chiefs team was it Andy's first team? Or it was end of the Quinnell era.
No, my first Chiefs team would have been 2006. Herm Edwards' first year, because I actually went up to River Falls. Love River Falls. But I think one thing with Herm Edwards, because his father retired out of the Army as the same rank as me. His dad was a Master Sergeant. And so when Herm Edwards found that out, he and I, we immediately connected. So from Herm Edwards to obviously Scott Pioli, Todd Haley, and then Romeo Crennel, and then 2013 Andy Reid shows up. And yeah, Andy and I have a pretty good relationship, I'd like to think.
So you were here you were here when Andy Reid started with with that regime, and so Andy Reid starts out of the gate winning 9 straight.
Yes.
and you had just covered a team that went 2-14 and ended in just a disaster. And it must have been. I wasn't covering the team then. I didn't come until 2 years later. Therese Paler was covering for the Star and Randy Kovitz for the Star. But
Two good men.
Absolutely, no doubt. And we get to see Therese all the time now because he works for Yahoo. But that must have been just incredible to go from 2-14 to what Andy Reid had brought. What were your impressions of Andy in that those first couple seasons?
I think the biggest difference from the former regime before Reid showed up to when Reid and then John Dorsey showed up was the locker room. That was the biggest difference. You can tell that the players really believed in the leadership that they had with Andy and John, because Reid is so personable. I like to think he is. And, Sam cracked a joke earlier. Oh, he does joke. Yeah, he's very personable.
No, he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
But my point was, if he said he missed you, then that had to be a joke.
Sam over here taking shots. Wow,
yeah, get used to that. He's a silent assassin over here.
That's my beat partner there. I think, for me, one of the biggest differences, and so you mentioned some of the differences there between Reid and the past regime, was the personality that came with Andy. The energy that came with Andy. It's clearly present over there. But I think the biggest thing for me when I changed beats was really understanding what an elite quarterback is. I mean, going from, because Patrick Mahomes was not here yet. When I left, it was still Alex Smith. And Alex Smith helped stabilize a dark period in Chiefs history.
For sure.
Because after Trent Green retired, you went to Heward, you went to Tyler Thigpen.
Tyler Palco.
Tyler Palco was there.
There's some Brody Croyle in there.
Brody Croyle. Here's the name: Matt Gutierrez, Matt Castle, Brady Quinn.
Yeah. Brady
Quinn. Wow. And so going from all that, and then Alex Smith was light years ahead of all of that. But then going to New Orleans and covering Drew Brees. Wow. That's when you know, when you put your eyes on an elite quarterback and the things they do and to prepare and how they practice. And one of the reasons why I enjoy coming back to Kansas City is because now we get to cover a generational quarterback. Patrick Mahomes doesn't come around every 2-3 years. This is a generational guy. And so I know Chiefs fans out here, just from watching from afar, are extremely excited. And I think if we as media members, we should also embrace that too. As one media member texted me, it's like, this is like going back to Chicago and covering Michael Jordan in the 1980s. It's a generational type player. And I think for the three of us and our colleagues, Sam and Vahe, we're going to embrace that.
So you got Drew Brees kind of at the end of his career.
Yes.
In the fourth quarter of his career. You're getting Patrick Mahomes in the first quarter of his career. And yet, I would think that one of Brees' best qualities is his leadership ability. Do you see any of that with Patrick Mahomes? I mean, I know that it's been from a distance, and maybe Sam McDowell is better equipped to speak to that than you are. But I just see somebody in Mahomes who has the ability to lead men, and if you've got that, and Drew Brees has that. That is a tremendous advantage.
One of the things you learn in the United States Army or any military when it comes to leadership is you lead by example. Mahomes suffers an ankle injury, 2 weeks ago? He's on the field. You lead by example. So if you're the star player, and unless your bone is sticking out, then obviously you can't play. But he did everything that he could to get ready to play this week. So he led by example. So when you talk about leaders, that's what you look for. Who's leading by example? And it's from top down. Andy Reid leads by example, and it just filters to the players.
And let's just sort of add on to that, we were all out there Monday for Andy Reid's availability, and he mentioned LaShawn McCoy doing the exact same thing with his ankle, which was a week later. So not that he wouldn't have done that if he hadn't seen Patrick Mahomes do that, but McCoy comes from a different franchise, so I do think it's notable that he sees the quarterback, the franchise player, doing something, and then all of a sudden he's sort of mimicking that the next week.
I thought that you and I were going to see each other at the Super Bowl last year when the teams that we cover were playing home games in the conference championship. We missed each other, as it turned out, with the Saints losing to the Rams and the Chiefs to the Patriots. But obviously, great seasons, great organizations. We talk a lot about the Chiefs locker room, and it's tight. We brought it up recently in terms of Jalen Ramsey. Would he fit in Kansas City? Would the locker room help him become a team guy? And I think the consensus is yes. But did you see that New Orleans with the Saints and their locker room?
Oh, absolutely. That is one of the things about the Saints locker rooms. They had the perfect combination of veterans and young players that not necessarily fall in line, because I guess that's not a really good phrase to use, but basically that's what they are doing. And then they're following the lead of your Cameron Jordans, your Drew Brees, the unquestioned leader on that team. Thomas Morstead, he's a punter, but he's been around forever, and he's one of the league's best, and then you just watch his example. Going back to us potentially seeing each other in February last year, I actually made that prediction. Before the season even started, then I was with the NFL, I made that prediction. I said the Chiefs and the Saints in the Super Bowl. And if not for two horrendous calls, the phantom roughing the passer on Tom Brady got heaven forbid you breathe on him, that was a brutal call. And then obviously the most egregious blatant no call in the history of the National Football League, the pass interference rule. But if not for those two bad calls, it's the Saints and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
I'm kind of curious because you've had a different perspective on this. We cover the Chiefs. We're in the Chiefs locker room constantly. You've been in other locker rooms, and I'm wondering if Mahomes, the Chiefs, but specifically Mahomes, is ever just a conversation, because we see the amazing things he does. We talk to him about it. We talk to his teammates about it. But I'm just wondering if out of thin air he ever sort of comes up in conversations in other locker rooms that you've been in.
Not in the Saints locker room, because most, and this is rightfully so, because most players will say, we're focused on our opponent.
And they haven't played each other.
Correct.
The last time the Saints and Chiefs played, Alex Smith was the quarterback.
But I will say this, the Saints management, at least, and the coaching staff really know Patrick Mahomes. Because don't forget, 2 years ago, John Dorsey jumped in front of the Saints at number 11 for a reason. Peyton did his due diligence on Patrick Mahomes. And it's not common for Sean Payton to fly himself out and work out quarterbacks. He did that with Mahomes. So there's a lot of grumblings going on that if the Chiefs don't jump in front of Patrick Mahomes, do the Saints pick him? Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that was going to happen, because that was probably going to be Drew Brees' heir apparent. And it's going to be interesting next year, because as we know, the Chiefs traveled to New Orleans.
Correct.
So that's going to be a nice little storyline. We're going to be all over it. Sean Payton, is Mahomes the guy you thought he was when you worked him out? When you flew out there to Texas Tech and worked him out.
Just one more team you can add to the list of what if we had Patrick Mahomes?
But that was legit though. There was a lot of legit stuff going on there, because the Saints were really looking at him. And I remember we asked Sean Payton after they picked Marshawn Lattimore, what would you have done? Lattimore's not there.
I think the Bills are on the top of that list.
For sure.
That's
and the Bears.
And the
Bears traded up for a quarterback. But you're right. The Bills trading out of that spot at number 10 that year and not getting them. I mean.
But can you imagine, though, because you've got Patrick Mahomes, it was a win-win situation for him. Andy Reid is a quarterback whisperer. We all know that. Sean Payton is an offensive guru. So just think about if he had gone either place.
Well, we've started to wonder here. Start's probably not the right word, but there have been conversations. What if Mahomes had started from the get-go in Kansas City and not, and not Alex Smith had that horrible slump at midseason and they lost 5 in a row.
5 in a row. And a 5-0 team. The other thing that was interesting about that, though, is when we saw Mahomes play in Denver in Week 17, he was pretty spectacular. But now you look back on it, and it might be his worst game as a starter.
That's right. Statistically,
20-some games later.
What? There's no 300 yards there?
Right.
Didn't throw a touchdown.
Yeah.
Had a pick. And yet you remember he came out of the game in the fourth quarter when they seemed to have it solved away.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Tyler Bray came in, and Denver took the lead, or tied him, or anyway. So they put Mahomes back in for a game-winning field goal drive.
I think a lot of fans, first of all, the backup quarterback is often a popular position for fans. Although here, finally in Kansas City, people don't seem to care about the backup quarterback. But I think even during that season, we were sort of wondering, is he even thinking about the possibility of turning it over to Patrick Mahomes? But at that point, all we'd heard was sort of this legend growing about what he was doing in practice. Of course, we're only open to seeing stretching every day, and we're not seeing the spectacular stuff he's doing within the pocket, outside the pocket. But yeah,
but you're right. We were hearing it from Eric Berry, from Marcus Peters, people like that.
Yeah, and you do wonder, would his development be a little bit different if he had played earlier. Maybe he wasn't ready for that moment. Maybe it allowed him to sort of ease into it. But it's hard to question any step that they've made with this guy.
I will say this. I'm actually glad they didn't throw him out there, because most rookie quarterbacks, when they're thrown into the fire, do not perform well. Going back to leading by example, watching the Chiefs slump, watching how Alex Smith handled that, it gave Patrick the opportunity to say, okay, so this is how a veteran handles adversity.
That's a good point.
Let me apply that to when it happens to me. And that was perfect.
Well, and Patrick himself has said that the environment that in which he was, that spent his rookie year, was amazing when you think about it. Not only was he, behind Alex Smith, a veteran quarterback, a former 1-1 pick, but he's got Andy Reid, he's got Matt Nagy as the quarterback's coach. I mean, that's the year they hired Kafka as basically Mahomes' personal coach. It was just an amazing learning environment for Mahomes that he, by all signs, took full advantage of. And the Chiefs benefit from that to this day. He's Sunday's game against the Ravens was Mahomes' 20th as a starting quarterback, and he's 16-4. And if the world ended today, he'd have the greatest winning percentage of a starting quarterback with at least 20 starts. So,
I think all 4 of his losses are by 1 possession too, right?
And all to playoff teams.
Yeah.
3 on the road, right? Because we were looking at this the
home
day.
game was the Chargers' 2-point conversion, but everything else was. But they're all 1 possession games.
No, they just don't lose. They haven't lost in a way that you just think, boy, what a stinker. Let's put this behind us. And the way they've played through 3 games this year, it's just been. If you're a Chiefs fan and you're thinking Super Bowl, I think your mind's in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of funny because now just when you said that, looking back at last year, their most exciting games have actually been their losses because they're always competitive in their losses. They're not always competitive in their wins. So some of their losses have been some of the best games to cover because they've just been the back and forth nature. It usually just comes down to what you and I, Blair, and what Herbie will be talking a lot about is, can the defense get enough stops? Because it's become to the point to where there's not a question of what the Mahomes-led offense is going to be doing.
So essentially, I'm coming back to what I left. There's always that question: will the defense hold up?
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, I think from watching from afar, I was always amazed at the cornerback play, the defensive secondary play, because it was always questionable, and it was always that. I think one of the best years they had here on defense was probably 2014, 2015?
15.
Yeah.
That's the year they started 1-5 and then 1-10 to end the regular season.
Can you imagine that defense with this offense?
I've thought about that.
It's over.
Gosh.
Yeah, I don't understand. I know they just switched the scheme, and Coach Reid does have a point. It is going to take them a while to adjust, but they did make the personnel changes because you want to get the pieces that fit a 4-3 scheme, and I get that. But sooner or later, they have to stand up and say, we're going to shut you down, period.
That was the Eric Berry comeback year after his Hodgkin's lymphoma. So that was Marcus Peters' rookie year. There was so much to like about that defense, and they just got better and better as the season went on. So.
They had two good cornerbacks, Sean Smith, Marcus Peters. You had DJ back there.
For sure. Justin Houston was, and Tamba was probably the last good year for Tamba, as I recall.
Wow. Memories.
Yep. Well, you'll be making some more of them, Herbie, here at here in Kansas City. We're so glad that you're back, and it's going to be fun covering the Chiefs with you and with Sam McDowell. Listen, if you haven't read Sam McDowell's story, I know we're going to switch sports for a second. If you haven't read Sam McDowell's story on Danny Duffy, that appeared in the print editions on Sunday and spent online for a few days, do yourself a favor and go read it. It's phenomenal, and we're going to get that kind of coverage on the Chiefs from Sam and from Herbie. And guys, great talking to you, and we will chat again soon.
Thanks, Blair.
Thanks, Blair.
Links to the stories we discussed can be found in the show notes on kansascity.com and the Red Zone Extra app. Thanks to Kathy Liu and Leah Becerra for putting together today's episode. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us. We'll be back on Wednesday for another episode of SportsBeat KC, sponsored by Big O Tires.